Hello, and welcome everyone to our team coaching circle, one of three gatherings before we close the year. And as we enter the last month of 2025, it's in a way a really good moment, perfect moment to invite a little bit more space and more time to reconnect with our practice through reflection in the community. So thank you very much for joining today. My name is Agle Holton. I am team coaching practitioner and I will be hosting a conversation today. And today we're going to explore the theme that plays a crucial role in every team coaching engagement, which is a group dynamics. To guide us through this, we are joined by Lucy and Paul, two very experienced team coaching practitioners, educators, and authors who spend years exploring these very dynamics in their work. And they also are deepening this in their recently updated book. So hi, Lucy. Hi, Paul. Great to have you on the call. Yeah, so Lucy and Paul together bring over 50 years of senior leadership and coaching experience. They run Performance Edge, a leadership and coaching consultancy, and they are both lead tutors in team coaching program at Henley Business School, where they share their expertise and they grow the next generation of coaches and leaders. So as I mentioned, Lucy and Paul co-authored the book called Building Top Performing Teams, which was released earlier this year in a second edition with substantial updates, particularly in the group dynamics chapter. So I'll share the link to the book in a moment in the chat, which actually comes with a really good offer because of a Cyber Monday. So I'll share those details in a moment. But with that, it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to Lucy and Paul as we dive into today's conversation on working with group dynamics in team coaching. So over to you, Paul and Lucy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to see you all. You can see some familiar faces as well. So good to see you. And yeah, just lovely to be here today. And thank you, Agle, for that introduction as well. So we'll look at what we're going to cover today, and then we're going to sort of start to step into sharing more around group dynamics. And before we do that, we'll do some connecting. So Paul, if you wouldn't mind moving on, we'll just share the agenda.
Okay.
So we'll spend a little bit of time connecting. I'll pass to Paul in a moment. Then we'll give a little bit more context around this whole area of group dynamics. And there's probably lots and lots of wisdom in the room. So we are not sharing this saying this is the be all and end all of group dynamics, but it hopefully will either refresh your memory or get you thinking about some of the key characteristics or challenges we face with group dynamics. And then we have a bit of a case study as well, and an opportunity for you to have a think and share your own best practice and thoughts about how you might address that, and then some sort of top tips and Q&A. So Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. Again, wonderful to be here today. I'm going the wrong direction. Okay. And really, two things we'd love you to share and chat. We're always fascinated where people are. You might want to add what the weather's like. So I'd like some sunshine because right now I'm 20 miles south of Belfast and it is miserable, cold, and wet. So I need some warmer environments to bring some heat into the room. So where are you joining from today? And also, when you think of the best team you're ever in, maybe it's your current team or a different one, but what was happening? What were you seeing, feeling, hearing? So when you think of the best team you were ever in, what was happening? Love you just to share in chat whatever you feel comfortable sharing on those two areas. Okay.
Oh, wow. Cheryl, so Cape Town, and Colette's in Munich. Lovely.
Oh, and the sunshine as well. Yeah.
And Simonetta is in Rome. Oh, lovely.
Oh, there's Victoria from Victoria. Good to see you again. From
Hi,
Copenhagen.
Victoria. Nice to see you.
Yeah. More mountains.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
dark and cold in Copenhagen. Oh, we're back in Copenhagen next year. The
There's
Mourne Mountains in County Down.
That's where
Lovely.
my brother lives. My brother lives up there.
Oh, really? Maria in Barcelona, Pascale in Derby.
Beautiful.
Dawn Hello, Dawn. Nice to see you in Victoria. Uh, Dallas and Dusseldorf. Oh, Adrienne, you're not far from me in Seville. Love Seville. Um, and
Beautiful.
Baku in Azerbaijan. Wow. And Alina in Spain as well. Berlin,
Brilliant.
British Columbia, Vienna, France, Geneva. Well, this is amazing, isn't it?
Amazing. And all
Birmingham,
there. Morocco.
Nigeria.
Yeah.
Wow. I worked in
And
Nigeria for about 6 months. Morocco,
Kenya.
Kenya.
That's where I'm from my honeymoon.
You're
Yeah.
from Kenya.
County Down near Belfast. Yeah. Grey and wet. We got the same weather, Caroline. Yeah.
Yeah, near to you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Dana from
Kasna from
Ukraine. Very good.
Ukraine.
Very good.
Oh, lovely.
Okay. And that second question then. Thank you very much for sharing. Some people started sharing already. What was the best team you ever part of? Maybe your current team. What was happening? What were you seeing, feeling, hearing? What was it? So people here saying people were really listening to each other. There was personal connection. People sharing personal stories, high amount of trust. Best team willingness to be challenged. Love that. Able to be in challenging conversation without hurting people. Yeah, and that's always a challenging one, how to have open, honest conversations. There's something from Limerick. Best team I've ever worked in. Wasn't perfect, but we talked a lot. The leaders, and we were
Mm.
aligned, okay, and trusted each other and shared personal things as well. Best team, shared purpose, helpful and cared about each other. That's lovely, the caring. Recognition, inspiration, common purpose, again, coming up again. Vulnerability, sense of belonging, mutual support, accountability, vulnerability, shared purpose. A lot of sharing with each other coming across as a theme. People are energized, excited, feeling the collective energy. Everybody's contribution was welcomed and valued. Lovely. Very good. Lucy, what would you say is the best team you've ever been in?
Wow, there's lots, but probably I have to go with current team at Performance Edge, which includes you, Paul, and I'm
Oh,
not just
thank you.
saying that. But but I think it's very much a team of there's sort of very deep connection. It's a team of coaches and team coaches, and there's very deep connection in the team and trust and we do have open and honest conversations.
We
Paul,
do.
you and I have
Yeah,
open and
we
honest
do.
conversations, and they're not always easy conversations, but they're
Yeah.
always very helpful, I think, to acknowledge some of the unsaid as well. And certainly helps, I think, have a better working relationship. So, yeah. What about for you, Paul?
Yeah, it was too. It was definitely I confer, and I wrote that in the book as well. I love working with Lucy. I love the team, and we have a wider team of people that support us as well. It's not just us.
Yeah.
It's not. This doesn't happen alone. But when I think back to corporate life, there's 1 year where I worked in a SAP implementation, and I led a team of 12 accountants, and I'm not an accountant by trade. And it was just the best year. My best corporate year, I call it, in terms of the team, was just an amazing team. We've all went on to do great things together, which is amazing. So yeah, it was just a really, really good memory. But the power of a joint purpose and the power of connection and a good deadline, it sort of helped as well. So, and the reason we asked that question, if you look at the comments that have been shared, there's a lot of positivity there. And I guess when we talk about group dynamics, sometimes it can go in very negative in what I was thinking about. And what we're talking about when we talk about group dynamics, we want to share a lot of stuff today about how do you create environments where that sort of stuff happens that was described in the chat. But also what do you do when that's not there? What do you do when that's not there? Okay. I'm just going to move on to the next slide. So over to Lucy.
Yeah, so what are group dynamics? So Alison Hardinger, one of the tutors, she was one of the master's tutors actually at Henley. She talked about group dynamics are these invisible and emotional forces and communications between individuals in a group, which leads the group to behave in much more extreme ways than any of the individuals would do on their own. But that doesn't necessarily mean, again, that those are negative. They can be, but actually, they can also be positive as well. And John Whittington talks about in his work around constellations and systemic constellations, he talks about, the group will exist within a system that will sacrifice members in order to achieve coherence and completeness. So that sometimes you find, scapegoating, etc., within teams. And then Peter Hawkins links to this idea of it's not just negative group dynamics, but he talks about often team leaders, sponsors, gatekeepers can fall into this trap of defining the team by dysfunctional behavior and current conflicts rather than actually looking at what are some of the positive dynamics and how are they working well as well. So just a few things in terms of dynamics, but we talk a lot about these invisible forces that we want to illuminate and help the team illuminate for themselves. Now, there'll be loads of wisdom in the room. So if
Yeah.
we're sharing anything, please feel free to share and add to that wisdom as well. So some of the dynamics that can start to present itself in teams, some come from, and Heron's book in 1999, it seems a long time ago, but actually there's some really good writing within Heron's book. And Heron talks about that we have, exact anxieties. So acceptance anxiety, will I be accepted, liked or wanted? Orientation anxiety, actually. So even when we step into team coaching, sometimes we hear people are wondering what's going to happen, what's it going to be like, or they may be bringing in previous experiences into the team coaching as well, and either positively or negatively reflecting on those and bringing those into the room. And performance anxiety, yeah, am I going to feel like I'm competent in this team or group, etc. as well. So any of those can start to present themselves, and I'm sure you can identify with those as well. You come into a new situation or a different situation, and you may have any of those anxieties starting to bubble up. Thank you, Paul. So it would be lovely just to hear in chat whether any of those you've experienced any of those anxieties before we just move into these defensive forms. So either I know I have. So it was either that acceptance, orientation, anxiety. Perhaps we just flip back, Paul, if you
Yeah.
wouldn't mind. Acceptance, orientation, or performance anxiety. Do those resonate with you? I'm seeing some nods. Yeah.
I don't think I ever understand what's fully going on. So I don't. So I'm always wondering different ideas. Orientation anxiety is something that's always like what was just asked, and I need things we put in chat as well to be really clear to be able to read it. I find it very hard to compute
Yeah.
verbally when
Yeah.
things are said. So
And I know when we're like doing team coach development, we certainly hear those start to pop up in people's language or, in the body language, even right from the very beginning, as to, oh gosh, am I going to be able to do this team coaching and what's that going to look like? And, are you going to think I'm not doing a great job? And all of those sorts of anxieties start to pop up for us too.
and there's
Thank you.
lots of
Also,
ones
loads of
in
those
chat.
popping
Yeah,
up in
yeah.
chat. Yeah.
And I
So
guess
very common.
the benefit of thinking about these is like if we feel these and we're working with a team, these are going to be in the room. Whether
Yes.
they're expressed or not, they're going to be in the room. So how do you speak to that in terms of how you work?
Yeah. And then what can happen is sometimes when these anxieties come up, they can then manifest themselves in actually some defenses um, in our behavior. If we're not acknowledging them and aware of them, sometimes they can actually then come up in our defenses, which leads to the next um, slide. So excuse there's a little bit of input here, but then we're going to get you very much into some conversation and thinking. So this is when then can start to bubble up. If, for example, we've got some of those anxieties, they can start to pop up into any of these defensive forms then in group dynamics. So it could be submission. So passive behaviors where you're just, following, or you're not really engaged and committed, but you're just going with the flow. Flight could be then you start to feel like you don't want to be there anymore, but this can then show up sometimes in sort of overgeneralizing or theorizing. Oh, I just haven't got enough academic knowledge around this topic, or I want more evidence, or I'm going to look at the statistics that have come up and I need more analysis around those. So these sorts of defenses can then come up, and then sometimes attack as well. we're going to talk a little bit about a case study later on, and certainly some of these defences were showing up in that case study. But attack then is very much you're rejecting what's coming from the coach, or it could be rejecting what you're going to do, or conversation.
Thank you, Lucy. We have six more slides before we do a case study, and there's a lot more text on these slides we normally like. We always like putting in pictures, and we just thought if we'd done that, you wouldn't be able to read the text. Okay, so do forgive us for the amount of text we've in. But you can read through these in your own time as well, because there is quite a lot of big terms here. But the next six slides are looking at six terms or terminologies that we often hear when we talk about group dynamics that can cause a lot of confusion. So we tried to explain them in a way that hopefully is understandable in a team coaching type context. So the first one is splitting. Splitting, I come, and some of us are from a place where we're experts in splitting, of othering other people in terms of society. And the process of dividing individuals into groups, into polarized entities, good or bad, and qualities are perceived as being contained in one or more of the opposite in the other individuals. This idea of good, bad, in groups, out groups type thing is another language you can use as well. And if you look at what's an example of that that happens from a team coaching point of view, a team member viewing other team members as for the team or against the team. It's just a simple example. You could put another 10 examples in there where people are doing othering, they're not this or that. Or if you think of a team collectively, a team that thinks of themselves as collaborative compared to another team that they consider obstructive. You hear a team talking about themselves versus another team in a way that can be seen as splitting as well if they're passing something on. So splitting is this idea of in groups, out groups, and something we have to be very, very mindful of how that happens. And society right now, we live in a world whereby, you know, we live in a world where this is happening more and more, whereby we're being polarized and entities are good or bad, A or B, rather than saying what are both, what's true for both parties, what's the space in between, and that's what we're always looking for when we're doing this work. Next term is projection. Okay. I know Lucy and I were writing about this. We were searching all different references, trying to find definitions that we thought were most useful. So these are the best definitions. If you've got other ones that are better, we're welcome to critique as well. And projection often accompanies splitting, but involves projecting onto other individuals or groups one's own unacceptable desires and impulses. We looked very, very hard to find references and research that pointed to individuals and groups. A lot of the stuff that talks about group dynamics sometimes ignores the group part, so more about the individuals. So individuals projecting onto other individuals or groups one's own unacceptable desires and impulses. I don't know about you, but the more I read these terms, sometimes I just get totally confused. So therefore, the right-hand side of the screen, bringing that to life, an example, an argumentative team member who does not consider themselves the cause of the arguments while highlighting a colleague as antagonistic. Okay. So basically, they've got stuff going on themselves, but they're actually passing it on to somebody else, projecting on to somebody else. A team example, a team that takes no responsibility for a project delay while ascribing the blame to another team. So blaming somebody else, passing the blame, passing it, projecting it on to somebody else. And the question is, whenever this is projected, whether an individual is projecting something or a team is projecting something, the question is, does the person that's being projected to take ownership of that? Or are they aware of it and able to let it just sort of pass them by? And that feeds into the next term, which is
Paul,
called,
just before you move into
yes,
that, there's a question in chat, which is this the same as transference and counter-transference? Um, and we're literally about to look at those. So
yeah,
yeah.
you predicted the next slides. Thank you, Pascal. So you picked the next slides. So thank you.
Yeah. So they are all interlinked as
They're all
well.
interlinked, yeah, and there's lots of crossovers. Thank you, great question. So projective identification, and this refers to the unconscious interpersonal interaction in which the recipient of the projection reacts to it in such a way that their own feelings are affected. So they unconsciously identify with the projected feelings. So again, how do you bring that to life? What's an example to bring that to life? The team member highlighted as antagonistic actually believes themselves to be so. They take ownership of some of those feelings, whether it's true or not. Or the team blamed for the project delay absorbs responsibility and takes responsibility for some of that delay, even if it's not them. Okay. So this idea of projected identification is yeah, and the reason we're sharing this stuff is just to being aware of it, being aware that these are all the things that are going on at all the time, possibly
and more.
And more and more. And
Yeah.
we'll never know most of the things that are ever going on, which is like, and that could be a little bit overwhelming. We're going to talk at the very end of today about top tips of how to deal with all this because it could be a little bit overwhelming. My goodness me, where do you stop learning about this? But we've got some top tips at the end. So three more terms, and thank you, Pascal, for your the prompt.
Yeah, and if people are identifying with it, please pop in chat because certainly projective identification. I know sometimes I'm thinking I'm taking ownership for something, thinking, oh God, what have I done? And then actually, the more I've looked into it through maybe supervision, I've realised it wasn't about me at all in the first place.
I know,
But
no,
I've
absolutely.
taken it on.
It happens so easily, and it's going to happen. So transference defined. We're going to look at two types of transference: positive transference and negative transference. Okay. And it's just the one definition on the left-hand side in both these slides. So the unconscious reenactment of the past in the present. That's a very simple way of putting it. The unconscious reenactment of the past in the present. If you look no more words, that'd be useful. But it can either be positive, where some positive being brought in, or emotionally conflictual or negative. Okay. And there's some more text there can just confuse it, but this idea of transference as a projection, this is where they're linked. A person unconsciously transfers and projects onto a person in the present earlier experiences of a similar person or context in the past. These are all interlinked. They are all interlinked. But transference is very much this reenactment of the past in the present. That's the way to look at it. Reenactment of the past in the present is the way to try and differentiate it. So what's an example of positive transference? During a team coaching session, a team member keeps positively comparing the current team coach or the team coaching to prior experiences, the team or team development that they did like. So they're recalling positive things, they're bringing positive teams. And the question, why are they doing that? What is the deeper reason? That they might just like the team coaching, they might just like the team coach, but there could be a deeper unconscious psychological reason as to why that's being done. So in this example, they may be subconsciously seeking approval for the team coach, looking approval. And this could include approval that they're not getting from others, which could include the team leader, okay, or members of the team. And again, it's just holding these things lightly and just being curious of what could be going on. And then you've got examples of negative transference. So exactly the same text on the left-hand side, the transference definition. So negative transference. During a team coaching session, a team members keep negatively comparing the current team coach or team coaching to prior experiences or development activities they did not like. Okay, so they're bringing up negative things. Now, this actually can happen whereby they might bring up a positive thing that they had somebody really great in the past, but they're doing it in a negative type way with an agenda. So that's where it can get a little bit confusing. So in this example, the team members might be trying to communicate deeper unmet needs, such as the team coach being unnecessary, the team coaching being unnecessary, it's poorly timed, the wrong team coach or team coaches, or dissatisfaction with the leader. And we've seen that before with dissatisfaction with the leader bring this work about. Okay. So whilst, it's that this idea of bringing up things, but what they're trying to communicate may be something totally different than what's actually being brought into the room. And this idea, the negative transference, Lucy mentioned Heron earlier on, describes as active resistance. I cannot say that word, even though I typed it. Anybody, denigration, I think it is. It's a lovely word.
Denigration, yeah.
Denigration, yeah. I know what it means, but I can't, what do you call it? Sabotage or rivalry. So things that people bring in could be with the team coach, leader, or others. Okay, so disruptive type behaviors can be a way this can be actually expressed as a negative transference can be expressed. And the last one, before we go into the case study, is countertransference. So it's a bit like the projective identification, as I taking ownership of something. Refers to the feelings, bodily sensations, or thoughts that are evoked in a person by someone else. So basically, if you look over here at examples, in the positive transference example, the team coach will suddenly feel happiness about themselves and their work. We're getting this positive stuff brought into the room, even though what the team has communicated may have nothing to do with them at all or the work. It could be something totally different they're trying to communicate, or they might just like the work. And this is where it gets fascinating. We don't know. We don't know. Okay. And what we're trying to encourage here is openness, curiosity, not always accepting everything that you hear or feel as fact. It's just your feelings in that moment and to explore. Negative transfer, an example, the team coach may suddenly feel inadequate or even sad that something been brought up as quite negative, even though what the team is communicating may be nothing to do with them, might be something to do with the leader or the work or something different. Okay. So we appreciate these are things you maybe need to read through again and listen to again. I know for me personally, I spent a lot of time reading about this and trying to work through it and trying to pick out examples. And there are times when you look at stuff and the definition of projection and transference are so close that you cannot tell the difference. So it can be quite tricky. But hopefully that's a useful just introduction to some terminology before we go into the case study. And we have fired a lot of terms at you there. So if anybody's not feeling orientation anxiety right now or performance anxiety, um, we understand that, but hopefully this will be of use to you to reflect on.
Paul, just before we move into the
Yep.
case study, it might be worth taking down the slides, just pausing for a moment. And I just put the question in chat, which terms do you identify with or might, you notice in yourself or others or resonate with you, any of those? I know there's a couple of people in the room that certainly have done some work around these areas before. Oh, Nicola, yeah, counter transfer is definitely something you've experienced. Me too, me too.
And any examples of how that comes to life as well that you want to share in the chat would be lovely as well. How because it sort of brings it to life.
What about for you, Paul? What resonates for you?
Yeah, the projection piece of projection identification. So taking ownership of feeling things myself when it's actually possibly nothing to do with me at all.
Yeah,
And it's something we'll talk about later on. This idea of the more work we do on ourselves, the more we become aware of these things,
yeah.
and the more we can work with it in the moment.
Yeah, Cheryl saying I'd love to take on blame that's not mine to take. Yeah, I definitely do that. Um, Jalisa.
Yeah, quick question. Thank you already for sharing. This is helpful in terms of orientation. And I started thinking about a session we had earlier this week, last week, around use of self in team coaching. And I keep wondering now, of course, you're not sharing this terminology, but how much of this way of observing and perhaps even testing what's going on in a group do you share during team coaching?
We will actually talk about that towards the end. We've got a section, some top tips, and we
Yeah,
mentioned that, but it's a great question. So it is a really great
yeah,
question. A question
yeah.
I would ask myself as well. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think yeah, it's great to do that, share what's going on for you as well.
Yeah,
Because often if it's going on for you, it's coming from the system somewhere.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So either
yeah,
be whether it's being projected or transferred
yeah.
or whatever it might be. So lovely. Oh, Jean, the role of the leader transferred
Oh
to me
wow,
as a
that
coach.
is that
Yeah,
one of
that
those common?
definitely can happen.
Yeah.
Definitely. Alessandro, projection, common defense mechanism, and so in team dynamics, absolutely.
And a real
Um,
watch out in that role of leader is actually the projection notification. You could actually take it on. You could start taking it on subconsciously because you enjoy it, because you miss corporate life or something like that, or you don't any there's different things you could. So it's not these things are all subconscious and are all watch outs to think about more deeply.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so we were going to share a case study and then give you the opportunity to go into some breakouts and have a bit of a conversation with some colleagues around what you might do. So we'd apologize again because there's quite a little bit of information in it. Um, and you might want to just take, as we go through, take the odd photo or screenshot to have it. But so the situation, the case study is, and it's an executive leadership team in the health sector, 10 team members, and two team coaches with them. In this situation, it was Paul and I, and we conducted one-to-one interviews and did a 360. And the first session you'll see there focused on connection, agreeing areas of strength for the team and areas they wanted to work on, and getting to know each other better in terms of who they were, not just what they did, developing their purpose and exploring some important business topics. So important conversations they needed to have, and then really moving on to personal team commitments. Um, and these were the key areas of strength for the team and areas they wanted to work on. So areas they wanted to work on were relationships with each other, team behaviors, managing difficult conversations, conflict, and decision making. So that's the sort of the first part of the brief.
I would recommend taking a photograph of that and this slide and the next slide for the breakout rooms would be very, very helpful.
Yeah.
If you give you a wee second to do that. So that's
Screenshot or a photo.
okay.
Okay.
The second part.
So then session two, so these are both part of session two. So session two was focused on, this is obviously what they had said they wanted to focus on as well, continuing to build the trust and connection, starting to look more at decision making and stepping into open and honest conversations, because that had come up as something that they needed to work on from one-to-ones and the 360. And in advance of the session, team members were sent a couple of questions to reflect on prior to session two. So they were going to look at giving each other some feedback around what they did that helped this be a high performing team and what they did that could get in the way of that. So that was part of that as well. And then we move into session two, and during the contracting agreements, we've talked about contracting there as a team coach piece, but agreements at the start of the day. We talked about moving into open, honest conversations, and 3 of the team members were very resistant around that and saying, "Oh, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that we were going to do sort of a goldfish bowl," and they're like, "No, we don't want to do that," etc. So, but indicated maybe they would step into it if it was in smaller groups or if it was pairs, etc. There was a force of resistance at this point. So as a result, after lunch, we sort of recalibrated, came back to them about to step into open, honest conversations, and so we suggested some different options to them. You could do it in pairs, you could move into smaller groups, etc., etc. The resistance then absolutely increased about tenfold. Saying that they were not willing to step into this and to take part.
I can feel bodily reactions remembering this now when you're talking about it.
I can too.
It's
I
live.
can
Yes,
too. I can too. So, so you might want to take a picture or screenshot, and Eglay has very kindly put it in chat as well.
Okay.
It's okay. And so the next piece is just a bit of a dialogue, a bit of discussion around, as team coaches working with this team, then what would you do?
And don't write a wrong answer, okay? There's no like
Exactly. No, and I'm not certainly sure we didn't take the right well, who knows, the right or wrong approach. We just had very good learning from this one, I've got to say.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
We wanted to share it with you. So brilliant. We're going to move into breakout rooms. There'll be some sort of small groups and a bit of an opportunity just to have a bit of a dialogue as to what would you do? What questions do you have before we move into breakouts, if any? People know what they're doing? People look like they're off. Brilliant. Welcome back, everyone. It would be lovely to hear maybe verbally from a couple of groups as to your thoughts, and then the other groups, if you wouldn't mind, just putting anything, a couple of bullets in chat to share so we can share from your wisdom. That would be amazing. So who would be willing to sort of share a bit of, what was happening in your discussion? What did you talk about? Just briefly would be really great.
I'm happy to go with that. So
thank you, Kate.
God, we had a really good discussion and we got cut off. I think we could have talked for a long time. There was a couple of questions, first, and then, because again, it's very easy. Hindsight's wonderful. And I suppose I was curious around the one-to-ones, curious about whether these people had, presented as maybe being, disengaged in the one-to-ones. Would they show that up like that in the room? I was curious around the charter or the agreement. Was there something in the charter and the agreement that we could say when this disengagement happened, that we could refer back to what they'd agreed they would not do? And there's another, I've forgotten the name, there's another wonderful girl in the room, and yes, Maria. And Maria had said, regardless of the charter being in place, because we can't cover everything, we missed engagement in the charter, but that doesn't mean we can't now discuss it, And for me, it's an elephant in the room. And I think, Paul, you might have mentioned this before in a previous piece. That's the content. There's content now presented in the room. We've agreed that we want to have difficult conversations, that we're finding it difficult, that conflict is an issue. And thank you, Mary, Jane, and Philomena, for presenting this, because now we have a real life example. It'd be great to, use that rather than trying to pressure them into taking part in something that they don't want to take part in. I probably kind of use the content in a real positive sense. This is great. This is live TV. Let's use it. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for saying no. You're allowed to say no. That's okay. Well,
Yeah.
let's work with what's just presented itself in the room and try to make it exciting and interesting as opposed to I'm wrong for not being part of this group and not saying yes because people are allowed to say no. But the charter bit, the engagement bit, is probably the bit I'd be hoping I've got something there that I can now hook back in on.
Yeah.
And that would be all after I took a heart attack. Once I took the heart attack and got back, yeah, then
Resuscitated.
yeah. Once I'd been lifted back off the floor, yes, I was expecting to rock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's really rich. Yeah, I mean, there was a sort of charter around it, and they'd asked that they step into this as well in the one-to-ones, that they were not going to go there. They were not going to go there. So thank you for that. And I love that though around, yeah, share what's going on. This is lovely, lovely information for us all to explore. So that's really lovely. And then in chat as well, we have there an option moving back into contracting phase with the team. Yeah, absolutely. Key improvement areas, relationships, absolutely. Unwillingness of the three to move into open, honest conversations. Yeah, yeah. So that's lovely. Thank you. Maybe hear from one other before we move into some top tips. Any other sharing in chat as well? Oh, there's lots there. Bring the team back into the driving seat. Co-create an environment where people would feel safe. What's the best way to move forward now? Yeah, absolutely. Lovely questions there. Thank you. How would you use his strength? Would you define a process of rules agreement? If you continue to like this, what would happen? Yeah, that's all really lovely stuff. Thank you so much. So perhaps anyone else be happy to share? Thank you, Kate, again. Any more for any more? No. Any
I'll go just
others?
because.
Go on. Thank you, Cheryl.
Just because it hasn't come up yet. I think for me, because I am one of those people who I find it very hard to kind of go into that challenging situation. You're always supposed to bring the challenge into the room. You're supposed to sit there comfortably. I'd be like Kate having a mini heart attack right there, because I think that's my biggest fear just in that case study. But I guess the question is, given that relationships was one of the things that they wanted to work on, is there a way to kind of know when there is enough trust to be able to go into those kinds of difficult conversations? Because I think that's probably something that I would want to be almost 100% sure on, that there is enough trust already built in the team before I go there. And I was just wondering if that was something that maybe you'd seen, hadn't seen, and yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, they'd done a lot of work around building relationships, building trust. We'd only earlier that day done some very deep work around sort of sharing lifelines as well, and it felt like we were really got to a real depth, and masses of vulnerability as well, and yet, and so actually it felt like we were sort of at a right point to be able to start stepping in, even if only gently, to open and honest conversations. And they had said that that was something they needed to work on, etc. They were just not gonna go there, and we moved into almost splitting as well. So if we go back to the terms earlier, very much defenses were all coming up. It was performance anxiety, orientation anxiety. There was probably a bit of acceptance as well. And then definitely some splitting happened as well. And there's some transference were definitely starting to happen as well. So all that started to bubble up in probably the biggest force I've ever experienced. I'd say that until this point, but then last month I had one that probably topped it. But it really did start to come up into quite a force, and it felt very strong and very directed. And even though we were going back to the contract, what else do you want to do? How do you want to move forward? They were just not going to go anywhere. So this carried on for probably about 45 minutes, didn't it, Paul? I think.
trying
even
to
maybe even
co-create,
longer.
come back to all that stuff, but the resistance was so strong that
Yeah.
there was nothing, there was no obvious way from that in that moment.
No. So we then said, well, what do you want to do then? And they said, nothing. We don't want to do anything now. So that was tough. And the team leader actually sort of stepped in and said, I think we should pause here and just stop and have a drink. Which was interesting actually, because we reflected on it afterwards. So we did pause there. And I think they then reflected overnight. And some of the feedback the next day was, oh, this has actually lifted a lid on something for us, because actually this has lifted a lid on the fact that we're not stepping in and having these sorts of conversations. And this is an executive team of a large organization. And the team leader reflected that they weren't stepping in as well and having some of those conversations. So rather than the team leader at that point in time support that work and stepping into that work, they didn't say anything. So I think what came out of it was a lot of reflection for them. In the moment, it was really tough to hold.
Yeah.
It was very uncomfortable. But
Yeah, the team leader was grateful that it happened afterward,
yes,
but then for our own point of view, it was really difficult. So
yeah.
yeah.
So and then they committed that they would, step into open honest conversations. And I think they've dabbled. But I still say there's an opportunity, definitely. So there was no magical bow
Yeah.
on this scenario, and sometimes there's not. However, it lifted some of those invisible dynamics into the room, and they stepped into the discomfort of seeing that there. So yeah, not a lovely completed
Yeah.
scenario, but loads of learning. And I think one of my reflections actually afterwards was probably what I didn't do, which I explored in supervision, was saying what was going on for me physiologically. And that's something I'm usually really tuned into what's happening in my body, but I think I was so tense from it, and there was so much discomfort because it felt like this really heavy resistance, that then I think I became quite physiologically tense, and I don't think was able to almost tune in to that and then share actually what was going on for me with that curiosity with the group. So
And
good
that
learning.
question that was asked, is there a way of being 100% sure? My answer to that is no. I don't believe you have to go your intuition, your gut, and sometimes it will work, and there will be occasions like this whereby your gut was wrong. And but I would always lean on the point of view, we have to follow our intuition, we have to follow our experience, and to be courageous as well. So, but knowing when to pull back. I'm going to share here some top tips then, okay? And this
Thank you for your comments in chat as
it's
well.
absolutely incredible where the time can go so quickly.
Yes.
And what we'd do, we'd ask you to please connect with us on LinkedIn, continue dialogue, please. We love that connection. There's a couple of top tips here that we just would like to share with you that we've written about and thought about and are very relevant to the case study we just talked about. It can be overwhelming the amount of stuff that we're talking about here in terminology, even that case study we just presented. So we always talk about know enough to illuminate. So team coach education and potentially train teams on some unconscious processes. That question was asked earlier on. So you might introduce the team to some terminologies of things that can go on in teams that are invisible, that can be positive and more negative. Also, then we talk about noticing with curiosity. So language like I'm curious. I'm feeling this in my body right now, and in a non-judgmental way, using your feelings as data, being in the moment, and trying to. And Lucy was describing how in that moment that was difficult in that moment. Exploring the self in the context of your past and present. So understanding what's your stuff and what's the team stuff, and trying to understand how your own. So for example, if corporate restructures comes up, I have a reaction to that because I went through that many of them and I was part of that many of them and done that many of them. But I have a bodily reaction to certain things that are mentioned at times. I don't conflict. I like things to be resolved. There's things that I own, and you have to be very aware of that. And then we also acting with compassion in service of yourself and others. So that quote there from the book, the collective human experience is complex and beautiful. And as a team coach, you will have difficult moments, times of doubt, and periods of deep satisfaction. So everything, all of those things are true. And the case study we did today is not, it's complex. It was, times of doubt, and it was, it was difficult. So we're not showing happy ever after. Sometimes this is just hard work, and that's okay. And you learn from it and do supervision. A couple of other things. This is a talk I was on 2 weeks ago, and somebody shared they were an expert in group coaching, and they were saying that the lack of theory on group dynamics to do with group coaching is very little, and I would say there's even less for team coaching. And what they were saying, we can stand comfortably on the shoulders of group therapy research. And this is a table we have in our book where we looked at group therapy research over the last 50 years and said, what's the relevance to team coaching? So the importance of one-to-ones comes out, and clarity before becoming more emergent comes out. We ought to be becoming more emergent, but clarity at the start. Being courageous, giving feedback in real time, managing your emotional presence, we're just talking about that, and providing a safe container. So all things we know about, but these things all have deep, deep roots in group therapy. So we can take comfort from that, even if the research isn't ever team coaching. And you can read that in your own time. There's actually more detail in the book about that as well. And then lastly, I would say if somebody asks, where do you go to read about this? And this, we could say we're biased, okay? I actually would say back to the thing we done at the very start. What are the best team memories you have type thing? And you describe that. We would say everything we've written about is about how to create that. And Beyond 1946 wrote this lovely paper and he talks about that stuff. How do you create a joint purpose? How do you create joint ways of working? So all these things, and I've highlighted 3 areas there in the book that are particularly developing team awareness section. There's a section on working group dynamics. We have another section on neurodiversity and diversity, and we think that's another thing that was at play in this as well potentially that we haven't talked about today. So there's so much stuff that can be going on, and that will leave you with that quote at the very top. Whatever does not get acknowledged or appreciated will usually find the way to present itself, often unhelpfully. And this idea, our job is to whatever appears, and that's just Kate said earlier on is the work. So without anything else to do, that's Lucy. You want to talk about that there, or I think
I'm conscious of passing back to Egle, so
yeah,
we'll share that in chat. But it's it's a one-off, as Egle said earlier, one-off opportunity. I think at the moment 40% off, cheaper than we get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to kind of to really appreciate Paul, Lucy, guiding us through this such a rich conversation today. I certainly got my heart racing faster when I was listening to the case study which you shared with us today. And I suppose what I'm taking away is that it's not always a happy ever after or a big bow on a package. And this is part of the work with the teams too. So as you mentioned, only today we such a funny coincidence that today there is a deal on the book which we are featuring in the session together with Paul and Lucy. So it's 40% off with the code which you're seeing. So I will ping once again in the chat if you are looking to kind of buy and avail for this offer. Wanted to appreciate Paul, Lucy, for taking us through this really interesting and rich conversation today, and for all the engagement for everyone who joined. If we could flip to the other slide very briefly in the last few minutes, just a very quick preview of what's coming up next in Team Coaching Circle community. So as I mentioned, we'll be closing the year with 2 more sessions coming up in December. Mid-December, we'll continue with the reflective practice in a team coaching supervision lab, and then we'll close the year with Fabio Garganego and Andrea Splandori, exploring wider organizational impact of team coaching. Looking ahead, very interesting, we'll open 2026 with a team coaching case study. We will explore Irish Defence Forces team coaching story, and we'll be joined by Brigadier General Brendan McGuinness, who will share Irish Defence Forces multi-year journey of embedding team coaching into this very complex mission-critical environment. So really interesting conversation ahead of us. So that brings us to the close. If you are looking to claim ICF CCE units, as on the next slide, you can do that. And again, we'll ping the form there. Once again, thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you so much, Paul, for walking us through this.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. It's just absolutely lovely to connect with you all, see some of you again, which is always lovely.
Please reach out and connect with us on LinkedIn.